An introduction to who the Mars Society is and what we do. I'm just going to maybe go to the next slide. I've given this talk. I recently was living in Scotland, and so I sort of went around Scotland to introduce people to the Mars Society. And so if you're already familiar with us, forgive me, so this is going to be a preview of what we do. So this is one of our quotes that we took in the founding of the Society. The Earth is the cradle of humanity, but mankind cannot stay in the cradle forever. So sort of our reason for why we do what we do, wanting to send humans to Mars. Who we are. So, and I'm sure you're all very familiar with this, but we're an international grassroots organization of space advocates whose primary goal is we want to send humans to Mars. And I've been doing this since 2002. I've been involved with the Mars Society. And we do this through advocacy, education, outreach. We obviously have our annual conferences like the one you're attending to, but we also have them in Europe as well. We had our last one this year in Bergamo, Italy. Next year it'll be in Poland. We do conventions, we do competitions, and we publish papers. This is just kind of like how we began. And so if you're not familiar, Mars Underground was started at the University of Colorado at Boulder. And typically, we go back to Colorado every third year. We're going to change that next year. I don't think we're going back to Colorado, but eventually we do. Every third year we go back to Colorado. It was started by young students. One of them is Dr. Zubrin, who is now the president of the Mars Society. Chris McKay, who is a NASA astrobiologist. Carol Stoker, who will be speaking tomorrow on a lot of her research that she did at the Rio Tinto, and she's now currently doing drilling on other planets, and she's using the Mars Desert Research Station environment to do her research there. Penny Boston, who works in extremophiles in caves. Those were the original founders, and they were students in a university who just had a passion for sending humans to Mars, and the Mars Society has evolved from that. Dr. Robert Zubrin, I'm sure you're familiar with, his Mars Direct plan was adapted by NASA, and they called it Mars Semi-Direct. And then the Mars Society started in 1998. So what we do are analog Mars missions. We have the Mars Desert Research Station, which I think if you heard David Levine's talk this morning, he talked about MDRS. And then we have the Flashline Mars Arctic Research Station, and that's in the high Canadian Arctic on Devon Island. They're two very different environments, and I'll show you some imagery of that. Our crew rotations on MDRS are from August to April. It's located in the Utah desert. It's a very different environment from our other HAB. It has a greenhouse, and you can see that on the right. And I don't have a picture of the Musk Observatory, but that's the only HAB we have of the two that has an observatory to look to do some research in astronomy. Here are some pictures of some of the early crew members. And they are from all different scientific backgrounds, from geologists to physicists, biologists. But again, we don't just focus on the science backgrounds or engineering backgrounds primarily. I mean, we also look at teachers, journalists. So it's not just the scientists and engineers that get us to Mars. We need a full spectrum of talents, backgrounds, and skills. So we look at all types of people to come out and experience MDRS. This is actually a really early picture of the lab that we have on the first floor of the HAB. You can see there's not very many things on the walls. I think now the walls are painted, perhaps I think red, green, and blue. We have posters up there. There's a lot more safety signs up. We have better equipment now at MDRS. And this is just another picture of a crew in sim outside the HAB. What we really want to focus on now, which may not have been our primary focus in the past, but we really want to kind of focus on the research that is done. So I think this year we're really stressing that if you're considering becoming a crew member at MDRS or FMARS, that you come with a research project. And we would prefer that you publish, and this was done by one of our former crew members, Bryon Show, who did a paper and a poster on his work, and he's a geophysicist. So on his work at MDRS, and he did some really great outreach for us that way. This is also, I think this was done by a team, Bryon Show, Joe Play is in the room, and they did a great poster on their 2009 FMARS crew. So this is what I would prefer if you become a crew member on FMARS or MDRS, that something like this would be a result of your time spent there. Something that you can go out and tell the general public. I mean, these are obviously done at at some science conferences, but really general public outreach, I think someone like David Levine is doing it as well, to tell people about MDRS and FMARS, and also tell them that it's something that the Mars Society does, and that's something that we often don't get. People will use MDRS, they'll say FMARS, and we don't often get that connection to it's from the organization of the Mars Society. So I really want to stress that. And let's see, is the Mars Society on this poster anywhere?
Actually, it's not even really on the FMARS website as prominently as it should be.
And that's a real important point that I want to make to the outgoing. So here's a little picture of our logo. Can we go back to the previous poster? I'm just curious if the Mars Society is on the previous poster as well. If you can go back. Oh no, back. Yeah. So I'm not sure. It may be in there somewhere.
Yeah, it's the middle one.
There's a logo. Okay, but it's really small. So. And this is just common from my own perspective, because I'm really interested in people understanding that this is put on by volunteers. This is put on by we are so dependent on donations and whatever grant money that we can come by. So this is why we also want to really stress scientific research, so we can get grants for the work that is done, because it's very costly to maintain these habitats. Thank you. So here's a picture of Bryon Show showing his poster, I think at AGU. That was happening in San Francisco, as it does every year. And he's done some really great outreach for us as well. Here's FMARS, so a completely different environment than MDRS. MDRS is in the desert, FMARS is in the high Canadian Arctic. It's extremely remote, and we all, for obvious reasons, do this in a different part of the year, and it's a very small window. Because of the extreme environments. If you're there past September, well then you're staying there, because then we can't get you out because you'll be snowed in. It's a completely different mission on FMARS. Here is just a quick look at the inside of our HABs. It's basically a 2-level habitat. We have our science area on the first floor with 2 airlocks. The bathroom is on the first floor and the shower on the first floor as well. There's just room for storage for the sim suits. On the top level is really where all the living quarters are, the kitchen, dining table, and also at the same time it's where you work and do all your what is it that you have, reports that you have to do. So we did have a Euromars that unfortunately, it was built and it was touring, and as it was touring around, I mean, they spent about $60,000 building it, and on a tour it actually was delivered at one point and came in pieces. So otherwise we would have had a third HAB somewhere in I think it was supposed to go to Iceland, but it's been destroyed since then. And that was actually a 3-level. It wasn't just 2 levels, it was going to be 3 levels. So we hope that that's something. I think the UK was mostly the group who raised the money for that. So we hope they pick it up again. So the idea of when to go to Mars, Dr. Zubrin talks about his rope analogy, to keep it very short, within 10 years, and that's what the Mars Society focuses on, is that we make it a goal and with a very short timeline. And we stress in situ resource utilization. So where we land and what we have there is what we're going to do with. Think more like Lewis and Clark expedition. These are real challenges and risks, and this is what we think of. Because right now we're spending a lot of time. We spent like 40 years now in lower Earth orbit, going up and down, and we don't want to stay there anymore. It's time to go to the next step, to go beyond LEO, and we're losing astronauts, crews on just going to LEO. So we think, we understand that sending humans to Mars is a great risk, but we think it's a risk worth taking to get to Mars.
By the way, is anybody going on tour?
Is it 4:30 already?
Yeah, it's almost 4:30. You've got less than 5 minutes to get to the lobby.
To the lobby if you're going into the tour. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Yes, and that's the Wright brothers. So, and I'm the acting executive director. I've only been doing this for about less than a year now. And I'm a science teacher by trade, so I teach physical science, introductions to physics, chemistry, and astronomy. So what I really want to focus on is inspiring that next generation of spacefarers through education and outreach, which I don't know if you saw or heard this morning. We produced a coloring book, so we're really trying to reach the younger crowd and really inspire, to get more people involved in the Mars Society. I'll go ahead and hit my own button. Oh, you got the coloring book. Oh, how fantastic. Thank you. So here's our coloring book that we have, and as I mentioned, it's going to be a trilogy. This is just one of 3, exploring Mars, and we've got images of MDRS, so that people know that it's the Mars Society that does MDRS. Let's see, I have a picture. In Colorado. And I'm going to say Indian Hills, but I may be wrong, because I think the addresses may have changed, but it's in Colorado, because we originated in Boulder, Colorado, at the University of Colorado at Boulder. So this is, I don't even know if a book like this exists. Perhaps one on space, but maybe not one entirely on Mars. And because it was published by the Mars Society, we're definitely going to focus on what we do, which is the Mars Desert Research Station and SIM research. Thank you for having that. I don't know if these videos will show. So going to Mars for a new and open a frontier. Oh, right, okay, sorry. I've not done this in a while. Yeah, Eric?
We'll make an announcement that there are
Thank you. Thank you. Oh, actually go back. Yeah, it's really 4:30, and I'm sorry that I ran so late. Go back. Okay. So here's some reasons why I think we're going to Mars, or we want to go to Mars, because it's a new and open frontier. The habitable zone, and one of the ideas is that our sun isn't going to be here forever. This is not something that's really always talked about, but our sun won't be here forever. It's a star that's lived half its life, and some of the reports that I've read that within 1 billion years, really, there won't be water in liquid form. So I think it's something that we have to just get the ball rolling, and I'd rather sooner than later. So the habitable zone that Earth is in is going to move outward as the sun loses mass. We're going to feel more of the heat of the sun. And the habitable zone is going to move outward from the Earth towards Mars, and that's really why we want to establish a colony on Mars sooner than later, to get it ready and going for when we're going to need to move to another planet. It's really a stepping stone, and one of the speakers touched on that today. I think it was, I don't know if it was Jeffrey Landis, but basically it's, right, because he's talking about Vasimir and how